Good morning to you. Welcome to another session on Kathy Mull Ministries. And today I'm going to speak to you about practicing contentment over condemnation. And for a lot of believers, it's difficult to, we talk about entering into the rest of God. And we know it's quite difficult to enter into the rest of God when there's a lot of expectation placed upon us to do things. Even this talk about faith, it sounds as if we have a lot to do. But today I want to speak to you about how we can live from a place of being contented instead of allowing that condemnation to influence us and govern our emotions and even our actions. And so I'm going to read something to you from For Theirs is the Kingdom. It says here, the most difficult thing for believers to do is to rest in God. We seem to have come into this world with an innate willingness and knowledge of how to perform and strive hard to get results. We think that when we do enough, we deserve a reward. If we're talking about the kingdom, striving and performing for attention do not belong here. If you're in performance mode, rest will feel like failure, and I think we can all relate to that. If you are insecure, competition will rule you. We only realize these things when we found the key to enter into the rest of God. We only know we have found that key when we see God go before us and His favor does what we could not do, no matter how hard we tried. Once you have tasted favor, you will never want to strive again. And so I've got the little story of Exodus 33, how God promised Moses saying, my presence will go with you and I will give you rest. Now remember, God had given Moses a very serious responsibility and an important job to do, a function, to lead the people. And so the request of Moses to God was, make sure that your presence goes with us because there's nothing else that's going to distinguish us from everybody else out there. And God said, don't worry, my presence will go with you and I will give you rest. So when the presence of God is with us, it means we enter into rest, doesn't it? But here on the planet, with all the expectations around us and the feeling of, I need to do more to get God to do more for me, we have to learn how to unlearn those expectations and that way of behavior and that way of thinking. And so I'm going to give you a few thoughts here. If you're one of those people who feel you're so tired of trying to find the rest of God, and that's not how it's meant to be. So the first thing we need to do is to control how we respond to things sent to destroy our peace. The enemy wants to rob you of peace and rob you of that place of rest in knowing that God is moving on your behalf. God is with you. He promised to never leave you nor forsake you. And so if we do not practice being content where we are now with the promise of God, not staying where we are and settling where we are, but being content, knowing that today I'm in the hands of God, I'm going to wait for the instruction, I'm going to cooperate with God, and I know that His presence is with me. That brings us to a place of security and contentment. So if we don't practice that, being content, other things creep in, and things like disappointment, striving, and even resentment, because we think, I'm in this place, I've done all I know to do, and God's blessing somebody else and not me. He's not answering my prayers. And we begin to have this sense of resentment because nothing is happening, seemingly nothing is happening in our lives. So practice contentment. This is what contentment is. And a lot of people do not have it today. It means an emotional state of satisfaction that can be seen as a mental state. Being content affects your brain, your thinking. May be drawn from being at ease in one situation, body and mind. Now I want to tell you, in the kingdom, it doesn't mean that everything has to be perfect, all your prayers have to be answered, or your bank balance has to be overflowing, and everything is perfect in your life for you to be content. To be content means knowing God is with you no matter what the outward circumstances look like, that God is working on your behalf. God has not left you. So Philippians 4:11 says, and contentment also means a state of peaceful happiness. Philippians 4:11 says, not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. If we can just learn that, to be content today for what we have, for the promises we have, for the presence of God in our lives, that's a fantastic place to be. But we have to develop that. We have to practice that. Get that practice into our lifestyle. And so a contentment also means a state of peaceful happiness. But I want to say it's the joy of God that is our strength. It's the joy of God that will help to keep us moving forward instead of settling where we are. And without the joy of God in our lives, knowing He's with us and for us, we will be overwhelmed by everything trying to steal our peace and steal our joy. And joy and contentment are the greatest signs of maturity and security in God. If even though you think your prayers are not being answered, even though things don't seem to be going the way the word says they are, the way the promise that you have, even though things seem to be opposite to that, when you can have joy in knowing that God is still with you, when you can be content in that place and have a sense of peace in that place because God has spoken to you, those are great signs of maturity and security in Him. If you want to throw your toys out of the cot, if you want to get upset all the time, if you're proud of the fact that you have you can't take pressure and you blow the lid off every time something goes wrong, that's a sign of immaturity. Because when you get upset and frustrated about everything around you, you haven't learned to be content in the fact that God is with you. And so if we're not content, condemnation creeps in, because condemnation will tell you nothing is changing because of your lack of prayer. God can't move because you're not ready yet. God doesn't love you enough because look at your mistakes. Look at the things you've done in the past. Look how you disappointed God. That's all called condemnation. And that condemnation is waiting at the door to creep in there when you cannot be content and joyful in the state that you are in today. So joy, let me give you this. John 15, 9-11 says this. This is perfected joy. Joy that has come, is mature. Not joy because you feel happy about you got a great gift sent to you today, or your bank balance looks amazing, or you got an increase at work, or even your prayer was answered. Joy that comes out of maturity is just knowing that no matter what happens on the outside, I have God with me. So it says, as the Father loved me, this is Jesus speaking, I also have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. Just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in His love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you, and that your joy may be full. Not so much full of joy, but your joy is perfected or has come to maturity when we know that we abide in His love, that His love for us never changes, and that already makes me feel content where I am. God's love is not like it doesn't grow hotter or colder depending on my behavior. His love remains the same. And this is where Jesus says, abide in my love. 1 John 1, 3-4 says, that which we have seen and heard we declare to you, that you also may have fellowship with us. And truly, our fellowship is with the Father and with His Son, Jesus Christ. And these things we write to you, that your joy may be full. Fellowship, communion, relationship with the Father and with His Son, Jesus Christ, brings our joy to perfection. So I want to pray for you right now to that joy will replace that sense of mourning that you have. That joy will be your portion today. That joy to be overwhelming in your life, to come to maturity in your life instead of discouragement and depression. And that today you will choose to be content. That Philippians 4:11, to be content in whatever state you find yourself to be. Don't tolerate the situation if it's anything that Jesus paid for. If today you are sick, if today you need provision, today you need restoration in relationships, today you need joy, that is the enemy trying to keep you in a place where you live in condemnation. And so be content in your inner man and say, God, I know that these things are not from you. I know that as I come to you, your presence is with me and you are going to answer my prayers. You're working on my behalf. You're a God of the impossible, and I'm trusting you today. I refuse to stay in this place but I'm going to be content knowing that you are with me. And then we close the doors to condemnation that's trying to blame you for where you are today. Because God wants to come through for you and for you to walk in love, in peace and joy. So be encouraged with that today.